Hi, I'm Joe Sillay with Federal National Commercial Credit. We're up to video number 4 in our series, Factoring Costs, the 10 most misunderstood cost drivers. And today's video is about advance percentages. You know, in factoring and asset-based lending, most providers will give you a percentage of your accounts receivable. That's the way they do their financing. So they may give you 70% or 80%, 90% of your accounts receivable advanced to you, and then they wait for the rest to collect. That's sort of the way it works. Now, so far in this series, we've been talking about the hard costs associated with fees and rates in factoring and asset-based lending services. However, in this particular case, there's an important soft cost to consider with respect to advance percentages. By soft costs, I mean it may not be a fee that you actually receive, but it is a cost to you in your business that is not really quantifiable necessarily. The cost in this case that I'm talking about is liquidity. Most of us, when we contract with a factoring or asset-based lending company, really want to be able to get as much cash out of our accounts receivable as we can. So, the higher the percentage of advance, the better the deal is in terms of liquidity. But the question becomes, how much more do you pay for that high advance rate? Is there a hard cost to that higher advance rate? And we'll get into that a little bit now to help you understand how to compare different providers with respect to advance percentage. So let's talk a little bit about the hard costs associated with advance percentage. In factoring, very often you will find fees or some part of the fees that's charged on the face amount of the accounts receivable that are being financed. Even though you may only receive a percentage of that. You have an advance percentage of, let's say, 80%. So you get 80% of the money, but the fees are charged on 100% of the invoice. Now, it's a little bit obscure, but there is a legal reason for why factors do this. If there were to be a bankruptcy, we all hope that that doesn't happen, but if there's a bankruptcy and the factor can prove that they had purchased your accounts receivable and were not just loaning to you, collateralized by your accounts receivable, it may give them an advantage in bankruptcy court over other creditors. So that's kind of why they do this, because if you charge on the face amount, it's one way to demonstrate that you actually are purchasing those accounts receivable, not loaning collateralized by them. Enough about that. The problem with charging on the face is that it makes the fees seem smaller than they really are. And that can make it difficult to compare pricing between different factoring companies, because how much it really costs, the effective price of that fee, depends upon the advance percentage. One of the easy ways, and probably the best way, to even out the differences in factoring proposals that are caused by different advance percentages when the fees are charged on the face amount of the receivable, is to compute the effective rate. The effective rate brings everything down to apples. You're comparing apples to apples. Everybody's computing the fee the same way. Doesn't matter whether it's on the face or the advance portion, if it's the effective rate. If you only have a 70% advance, you want to know what the rate is, given that you only get 70% of the money. What's the rate on that 70%? Let's have a look at a slide here that illustrates the way you would do that. In this slide, I'm trying to show how the effective rate changes with advance percentage. In the example, we have a fee of 1.5% charged on the face amount of the invoice. But let's assume that we have 4 different proposals. One of those proposals is an advance percentage of 70%, 180%, 185%, and 190%. So those are our 4 proposals. So we want to be able to compare those fees. As far as we know, on the nominal fee, the 1.5%, it's the same for all of them. But because they have different advance percentages, their effective rate is different. You can see here that with a 70% advance percentage, 1.5% charged on the face is equal to an effective fee of 2.14%. So you can see the lower the advance percentage, the greater the effect on fees, the higher the effective fee will be. Now, it's pretty easy to compute this. I'm sure you figured it out just looking at it. But essentially what you do is to compute the effective fee, you take the quoted fee, the 1.5%, and you divide by the advance percentage of 0.7 or 0.85. And that's how you get the effective fee. Simple algebra. In conclusion, when fees are charged on the face amount of the receivable, you need to compute an effective rate to be able to compare different proposals if the advance percentages in those proposals is different from one provider to the next. Compute that effective rate yourself. Don't just ask the factor or the asset-based lender. Compute the rate yourself. You might consider asking for help from your trusted advisors, your accountants, your lawyers, your banker, that you can trust to be straight with you and to not have a divergent interest. But compute them yourself. Make sure you understand how they work and how they were computed. You might consider taking those results back to the factoring company and asking them if they think they're accurate. And if they say no, make sure you understand why they think you did it wrong. But compute them yourself. Make sure you understand how it works. Lastly, when you have effective rates that are essentially equal, the higher advance percentage is usually better. You're going to be able to get more cash for that same effective rate. Thanks very much. I'm Joe Sillay with Federal National Commercial Credit, and you've been watching our little video on advance percentages and how they affect factoring costs. See you next time.